So I'm redoing this video because I didn't realize that when I last recorded this, it kind of froze when I opened one of the pictures. So if you're going through this again, apologies, and hopefully this makes a bit more sense. So this is principle number 4. It started in childhood. Now, if you experience anxiety as an adult, there's a good chance that it started in childhood. Not always the experience of anxiety, but the patterns that create an environment that leads to anxiety. So it all starts in childhood. You're born with a clean slate, not knowing what is good, bad, right or wrong. And from birth to around 7 years of age, your subconscious mind is dominant and your conscious mind hasn't yet fully formed. In this time period, your mind is like a sponge. You're learning from your experiences and you're mirroring your parents' patterns. Now, Aristotle quoted, "If give me a child until he is 7 and I will show you the man," meaning that he could create the patterns by kind of modeling and mirroring for the child, and then it's typically going to be the patterns that you're going to end up as an adult. Your patterns are subconscious beliefs and your behaviors. Your beliefs shape your inner reality, and your inner reality shapes your outer reality. So the quote says, "Before we create the world of our minds, the world creates our minds from our experiences." What this means is that, say for example, from birth to 7, whatever you're experiencing shapes your model of your reality, your inner reality. And then as you become an adult, you then prove that reality true. Say, for example, if our mothers were not present and maybe not able to give us the love that we needed, we may have created some subconscious belief that says we're not worthy of receiving love. And then we may self-sabotage in relationships as adults, or sacrifice or accept breadcrumbs of love that, relationships are just not fulfilling God's desires. So if your emotions of vulnerability were met with a lack of compassion or judgment, you would learn to avoid them. For example, stop being so sensitive. I'll give you something to cry about, or big boys don't cry, etc. Now, I've said things like this in the past, and just like your parents, they can mean well but invalidate the child's feelings. Often a child may be feeling something about, say their toys being in a certain way, and then we find it upsetting. And as adults, it's very easy for us to kind of invalidate the child's feelings because what they're talking about isn't really that important. But to them, it actually teaches them to suppress their feelings and that their feelings aren't okay. Now, most of your patterns would have been inherited from your parents. We learn from modeling and mirroring the people around us, and this happens unconsciously. If your parents didn't model good emotional intelligence, healthy expression, nervous system or emotional regulation, and showing you how to release your emotions, you wouldn't have learned this either. If they hid their feelings from you, and they never modeled healthy emotional regulation and release, how would you have learned it? You would just learn that your feelings are something you avoid. If they wasn't attuned to their own emotions, they wasn't present, they were busy, they had no support, they were stressed out and could barely deal with their own feelings, then they wouldn't have been able to attune and hold space for yours. Or maybe they were self-sacrificing all the time as parents often do, and they never modeled healthy self-care. Patterns get passed down. They likely inherited many patterns from their parents, and you're also likely to mirror your parents' boundaries or lack of them. If there was a lack of healthy repair after ruptures, such as silent treatment, isolation as punishment, pretending nothing happened after, etc., you wouldn't have learned healthy conflict resolution. So imagine that, say, for example, all of your parents' unhealthy patterns, you're going to inherit all of those, and chances are you're probably going to pass them over to your children unless you heal those patterns too. Most of the patterns that have created or that create anxiety are because we are unable to hold space for our own feelings, to have a healthy conflict resolution, to be able to express, feel our feelings, and actually allow them to pass through us. Your parents didn't teach you this because they didn't know it themselves. So we're not pointing fingers here. There's no kind of judgment, but it's just understanding of how we ended up in this situation in the first place. You also inherit your nervous system from your parents. Your nervous system resilience is shaped in childhood. If your parents couldn't regulate their own emotions and nervous system, then they wouldn't have been able to regulate yours. So I'm not going to click on this because I think when I do, this is when it kind of freezes the video. So I don't know if I can zoom in, see if that works. So vagus nerve is your primary wiring. You're only born with dorsal vagal, very little sympathetic nervous activation. You can't run, fight, or mobilize. So you can't go into fight and flight. But at this age, when you're born, not a lot was happening. You're only eating, pooing, and peeing, but you can only shut down if you need to. Your ventral vagal response, which is the green zone response, has to be built and wired in. A ventral vagal response is also, what we require to kind of safety connect to our body and safety connect to others. This needs priming and modeling through interaction with our primary caregivers, typically mum, and we mirror and inherit their vagus nerve. The vagus nerve develops the most in the third trimester of birth up to about 6 months of age, mirroring the mother's nervous system state. It will also continue to grow, up until the age of sort of 21, but most of it's going to be from, the third trimester of birth up to, say, the first couple of years of your life. Now, the baby can't self-regulate its stress. It cries when it feels stressed and it needs co-regulation. The mother needs to be attuned to baby and regulates the baby as and when needed. If mom was stressed, not present, or she was unable to attune to herself because of their own stress or trauma, then she wouldn't be able to regulate herself or co-regulate the baby. The baby then gets stressed and cries, and if it doesn't get regulated, it learns the default to freeze, such as sleep train the baby. So if you don't know what sleep training is when the doctors tell mothers to only pick up the baby if it needs feeding or changing, and not outside of those time frames. Now, this does work, but what happens is it teaches the baby that no one's going to come if you're crying, so you may as well kind of just stop crying. But what it doesn't just stop crying, it disconnects and suppresses this stress in the body. Now, this is incredibly taxing on the system and developing little to no stress resilience. Now, this doesn't mean that your mother, or if you are a mother, if you are a parent, it doesn't mean that you have to kind of be there 24/7. But it's being able to kind of attend to the child the majority of the time. If your parents didn't have a healthy nervous system and good emotional regulation, you would likely just mirror theirs. Without healthy vagus nerve, your ability to handle stress, emotions, self-regulate, and connect with yourself and others will be affected. Now, the good news is that no matter how old you are, this vagus nerve can be wired in and it can be improved on and strengthened through the somatic self-care techniques that I kind of practice and through co-regulation. That's with connection with another. So it's never too late to work on this. It's never too late to kind of build on your nervous system and to also heal and release the unhealthy patterns that we may not have. So any patterns that you picked up from your parents, you can break them, you can release them. And then this means that you no longer carry them yourself, which means a healthier environment for you to feel your feelings and release them so it doesn't create anxiety or disconnection. It also means that you won't model them for your children to pass on to them either. Hopefully this helps. Again, any questions that come up with this, please ask in the community or reach out for support if needed.